fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream. Good morning all and welcome. Acknowledgement to country. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. We now hand over to Pastor Mark Dewar from the Cassowary Coast Uniting Church to deliver the opening prayer. Mark.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
As I, just before I pray, I'd like to share a verse with you that helps to inform me in my leadership role. And it is from 1 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 2, and it says, "Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful." No doubt this verse is directed towards us in the church, but I believe also to all people in leadership, both elected and appointed across this region. So let us pray. Lord God, your Spirit has moved over the face of Australia and formed from its dust a rolling brown land. Your Spirit has moved over its warm tropical waters and created a rich variety of life. Your Spirit has moved in the lives of men and women and children and given them an affinity for this country and brought them to a place of freedom and plenty. Your Spirit moves today in the towns and villages of the diverse region we call the Cassowary Coast. This place we call home is a gift to us. Lord, there is much of which we are proud, its diversity and culture, its festivals, the success stories, the events, the resilience and the tenacity of the people. Yet, Lord, we know there's so much more to do. There's some characteristics of our region we love and some that make us shudder. Lord, I pray that these men and women, our elected leaders and those appointed to serve in this council may be able to put aside personal agendas, political ambitions and the capacity to wield power so that they may, right here and now, prove faithful with the trust that has been given them, to continue to govern with diligence, to continue to be trustworthy leaders that they are for the sake of the region that we all love. Lord, I lift these men and women up to you now, and I thank you for their God-given capacity and willingness to be courageous leaders. I ask that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and the true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together even when there are honest disagreements, personal peace in their lives and joy in their tasks. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work around our region here on the coast. In the name of the one who came to save and set free all of humanity, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Do we have any apologies, councillors? Take that as a no. Declaration of conflict of interest. Councillors and staff, declaration of prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Any declarations to declare? Councillor Millwood.
Good morning, and through the chair I have a declared conflict of interest in item 5.6 on the agenda.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chairman, I can confirm that Councillor Millwood has provided me with written notice of that as required.
Okay, thank you. Any other conflicts to declare? No. We'll move on to item 1, confirmation of minutes. 1.1, minutes of the local government meeting, the 11th of February 2021. Somebody move that a true and accurate record, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Any business arising from the previous minutes? Take that as a no. Move on to item 3, community and culture. Item 3.1, libraries update. And Mr. Sadler will present this report. Welcome.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Morning, councillors. How are we this morning? I'm presenting the report with the libraries update today. In front of you goes through I suppose there has been an increase in relation to usage within our facilities, with average loans up over 11,000 and an average around 2,000 on e-resources. So our community is really tapping into that, particularly from the recovery from COVID. Our libraries have received some grants in relation to Mission Beach and Cardwell libraries, and also conducted some stuff in relation to our local history and had a symposium. As part of that, we've been upgrading the Mission Beach library, and that's on track at this stage. And we've got some grants in relation to some of the furnishings and also in relation to STEM. Our tech savvy stuff continues and continues to be well utilised and well valued as part of our community. The Tully Library, in relation to refurb and the plans associated with that, have been submitted and waiting for review as part of the future budget process. And the local history register has been worked on and is at about 80% completion rate. So reports in front of you, Council. I'll hand back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Sadler. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, just in regards to the refurbishment of the Tully Library, do we have any information that can be shared about what's going to happen in that space?
So through the chair, I talked to Joyce. So I forgot to say this at the beginning of the report. Joyce would have presented this, but she actually retired last week. So she shared with me that there has been some community consultation pieces that has gone out, and there's a sketch plan in relation to what the changes look like in relation to the current floor space. So it's looking at a meeting room type facility and a bit of a kitchenette, and I think there's a bit of a detail in relation to the words in the report.
So are those plans available for the public to view or not?
My understanding is yes, Councillor, through the chair. I'll get Catherine to chase that up for me.
Any further questions for Mr. Sadler? Councillor Pervin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just in your report there, it speaks about the Next Chapter Book Club. I'll just have a few words to say on that. I've partaken weekly in this since being elected in council, and we have on average 6 to 8 participants weekly partaking in it. They absolutely love it and look forward to it and look forward to attending it weekly. From my point of view, to watch these attendees and see their passion and how much they have improved over this time is wonderful to see. I'd like to thank the library staff, in particular Joe, who attends weekly. I'd like to see this rolled out across all library facilities across the region and encourage those wishing to partake to contact the customer service. It's a great initiative, it's really good. They just absolutely love it. So I'd just like to, once again, thank the staff there for that. And the participants, they can't wait to get through the door every week.
Thanks, Councillor Pervin. Any Councillor Chewy?
Yes, through the chair, I would also just like to take the opportunity to congratulate Councillor Pervin on the role that he's played in the Next Chapter Book Club. It is a great opportunity for people to come together. We have done a couple of sessions at Mission Beach, and I'm hoping once the library refurb is done that we will be able to have some more people partake. And I know Councillor Millwood would very much like to see it happen in Tully Library as well. So it is a great project, and hopefully we can all work together to make it throughout the Cassowary coast. But as I said, congratulations to Councillor Pervin, because he really has embraced, he's a champion of this project. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Chewy. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Millwood?
Yes, through the chair. Likewise from me, Nick. I think it's wonderful, and I'm a bit jealous that we don't have any participants in Tully, but we're working in that space.
Thanks, Councillor Millwood. Any further comments, councillors? If not, would somebody move that the recommendation be approved? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Sadler. Item 3.2, customer service update. Mr. Sadler.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Council in front of you is just an update report in relation to customer service, part of our organisation, and since our new team lead has come on board, we've had some changes in relation to our processes, and I suppose a focus on how we improve our customer experience. And today is just an update of where we are in that regard. We have been having a significant push on reducing our call wait times and particularly our closeout of our CRs. So today's report just gives you a snapshot in relation to, I suppose, some of the successes there and some of the things that we're doing, particularly changing a few things around quick closes and things like that. So trying to resolve any query that our customers may need at the first point of call, and particularly the customer service team are working within the business to understand all the different types of things that are going on for the day and the week, and being across what's really going on in the delivery space of this organisation to, I suppose, help our customer out as quickly at the first point of call. So there's some data there in the report showing that, and also, I suppose, giving an indication of some of our front of house things in relation to rates and things like that coming in. So it gives you a bit of a snapshot of the day in the life of customer service.
Thanks, Mr Sadler. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, Mr. Sadler, just with the customer requests, I note that it's been very wet in the last month or so, and we've had a huge increase in customer requests. From my understanding, there has been a backlog, and you've attended with more staff to act on these customer requests. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, through the chair, we have a cyclic thing with the wet season every year. We do get a huge amount of customer requests coming in, whether that's related to roads or drainage type issues with the wet. Yes, we have got a volume there at the moment, and we have been focusing on those over the last couple of weeks to try and close those out. Obviously, things with roads at the moment, particularly with the wet, our graders are just heading out now. We can't just go out there when the pavements are wet. We need to make sure we get those things done at the right time. So we are focused on those requests at the moment, and are seeing a significant change in relation to reducing those at the moment.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, would somebody move the report be received and noted? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 4, Economic Activation and Tourism. 4.1, Target Great Barrier Reef Event 2021, and Mr Blanchett will present this report. Morning.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, councillors.
Mr Blanchett.
Morning. Morning, Cassowary. Good morning, councillors. So this report from Economic Activation and Tourism is in regards to the Targa event, and the report will look at the event we were fortunate to host last year and the opportunity to secure it for this year, and potentially 3 years for your consideration. So in summary, the 2020 event was during a COVID period, but still fairly successful, all considered. And to secure the event this year and into the future, there's a consideration of some sponsorship and in-kind support for the event. Specifically, the recommendation is in 2 parts. Part 1, that Council supports the Targa Great Barrier Reef event being held in the Cassowary Coast region on either Saturday 4th of September or Sunday the 5th of September, one of those 2 days. Part 2, that Council enter into an agreement with Targa Great Barrier Reef to sponsor the event to the value of $25,000 plus GST, with in-kind support is indicated to a maximum value of $10,000 a year for the next 3 years. That's the recommendation.
Yep. You want to speak further, Mr Blanchett?
Yes,
Yep, okay.
yes, I can. Through the chair. So just a quick background, the 2020 event, Targa Great Barrier Reef is a wider regional event based from Cairns, and it covers far north Queensland and several local government areas. As mentioned, the 2020 event proceeded as a valued event for Tourism Queensland through the COVID period for social and economic reasons. Despite the challenges, we still saw 100 cars participate, and with those 100 cars, there's roughly 2 people per car, and there's a crew base of about 150 On top of that, of course, family supporters and then the local spectators. There's a summary of our measures of objectives from this event, and the three key areas are social and economic benefits for our community. The exposure as a destination and partnering with community. Under the exposure, Tourism Queensland call this event a touring event, and that fits well with our drive market, which is a heavy market for the Cassowary Coast. It gives us the opportunity to present dispersal. So with the high visual coverage of the event, they're seeing lots of location and places around our region instead of the usual hot spots. This shares with them our lifestyle and our scenery. Looking forward, the destination exposure is still a key benefit, and again the event is heavily supported by Tourism Events Queensland. There's a summary there of some of the marketing report from Targa based on the last year event. So this will show you some of the social media results as recorded in September, just after the event last year. And the viewing is fairly high in those statistics. The highest amount of exposure this event gains for locations is through the actual coverage on networks, on TV, Network 9, and this goes global. The day 2 highlights was a full highlight package on the Cassowary Coast stages last year, of which we had 6 stages and 2 transit stages, including a lunch. This year and the future years, we hope there'll be better opportunity to leverage more outcomes, because we won't have a closed lunch, for example, which was closed due to COVID conditions, which reduced our benefit to share the event with the community. Looking forward for your consideration on this year's event, we've already started to list some of the benefits and opportunities, which include that having run the event for 1 year, there's more familiarity of the event for our community, of where to see the stages and at what times, how to engage with the event. We are having very positive talks with the event organisers about a hero stage, or you could call it a signature stage. And this has still been discussed in detail, but this would present as an opportunity to have probably the most prominent stage in the whole event in far north Queensland, if we are successful in proceeding that. Obviously, we'll importantly expand the destination exposure. We expect there'll be more commercial opportunities for the hub of the event, and already at this stage it looks like it's particularly for Innisfail, and we're hoping to engage the Chamber and local businesses to leverage those opportunities. By providing a viewing guide for spectators and best locations and times to view the event. Another better opportunity for next year, we're talking to them about a cavalcade. Through the chair, I'm not sure if councillors saw it was on the news every night last year, and there was a cavalcade through the streets of Cairns that were fairly popular. Personally, myself, when transiting from stages in Silkwood, I saw children and standing on the side of the road raving at every car driving past. So we'd like to see a cavalcade opportunity, so our children and our community know when the cars are driving through their neighbourhood and they can connect and share in the event. Commercially, there's a lunch stop opportunity, and we're talking about a finish show. So at the end of the day, there would be like a finish line show where all the cars would gather, and there'd be a bit of a celebration for community to again connect, and potential commercial opportunities there. So those are the key elements of the event, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchett. Any questions? Councillor Farinelli.
Just a comment really, and to congratulate the team. There's been a lot of work put into achieving where we are right now. I've been involved in a few of the discussions with Mark, who's the CEO of Targa, and then Hamish last week. They're so driven to bring this event to our region, so I really hope council does give it their support, the benefit to our economy coming out of COVID, and basically sending a message to the region, but also outside the region, that the Cassowary Coast is welcoming of this type of event, I think is beneficial to all. In my discussions with Mark, I also, asked him whether there's any issues with our local businesses using the Targa brand for product like Targa burgers and Targa pastas and that sort of thing as part of the event. They have absolutely no problem with us, with our businesses using that. I think there's great potential for the Chamber to partner with us, through maybe helping host an event. It's very exciting. And I mean, obviously when we come to council with this type of sponsorship, it's going to be with a long-term vision. So it's not a one-off event. This is a financial commitment, but for me, this gives businesses the opportunity to now plan. They may run with a smaller event themselves, dip their toe in the water and see how it goes for 2021, and then they see how that works and go bigger and better for 22 and 23. So I hope we get to bring even more exciting events to the council. The staff get to bring even more exciting events like this to council, because this is really showing us as a region that's going out there and going for incredibly exciting events that's going to really drive economic development and tourism for this region.
Thanks, Councillor Farinelli. Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair, I'd just like to say I did experience Targa last year, and I was sitting up the back of Silkwood on a one of the corners where they were passing, and it was actually amazing to see that there was about 15 or 20 other cars also parked there to watch it. So yeah, it does bring people out, and I think it's great.
Thanks, Councillor Millwood. Any further comments? Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, Mr. Blanchett. Sorry. Stages and that, have they been set down yet or not at this point in time? It's just still early planning stages, is it? Or have they got particular stages they're looking at doing in certain areas?
Yeah, through the chair, they started researching the stages in detail. They were in region last week. The first stage is to review last year's stages, and they do a fairly detailed road inspection. So they have been in region, scoping around region. We've asked them to report back on specifics of the stages, particularly the signature stage, and we're waiting for that report, but I expect we'll have that within the next week, 2 weeks. And they, being a major event, they manage the announcement of those stages. So while they'll report that to council and confer with council and Transport Main Roads, they will at the right time release the stages to their customers in the world.
Any further questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Farinelli. Move the recommendation. Seconder. Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blanchett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item 5, Governance, Environment and Finance. 5.1, changes to transfer station operations, and Mr. Bradford will present this report. Welcome.
Morning, councillors. How are you going today?
Good, mate.
Good, thanks. I'm here today to present a report relating to some changes where officers are recommending to our transfer stations across the region. It's a result of council making a decision back in August last year to change over to day labour at our transfer stations and landfills from 1 August 2021. Part of the project was to review the operations and look at opportunities for efficiencies, and officers have reviewed the current usage and a number of other aspects of the transfer stations and are recommending some changes. So in coming to this recommendation, officers have used a number of the principles that underpinned asset rationalisation, particularly focused on bringing benefit to the whole region, looking at opportunities for reducing depreciation, insurance and other operational costs to improve our financial sustainability, and acknowledging different scenarios might require quite different solutions. do apologise from the initial report, that initial agenda that was sent out. There was a page missing from the agenda of this report, the second page. That has been distributed. I believe you have hard copies, and I hope that you've had sufficient time to review that. If you've got any questions, I'm able to answer those as we go through. The recommendations that council's come to, we've looked at each transfer station individually. So if we start with Stodders Hill transfer station, we're recommending a slight reduction in hours there. It was identified through the process that the number of customers using the facility after 4 p.m. Each day was significantly less. So officers are recommending a change of hours there through the week for 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekends. So a slight reduction in hours there. At Tully transfer station, it was a similar situation with the reduction in customer volumes after 4 p.m. And so we're recommending that through the week the hours there are the same as Stodders Hill with 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. On weekends, we've received a number of comments from customers. It was unsolicited comments. It wasn't a survey or anything council conducted, but general comments were that the afternoons on weekends was not always suitable. So we're recommending that the hours change to 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So still the 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday, but just bringing it to a morning slot rather than an afternoon. At Mission Beach transfer station, this is probably one of our busier transfer stations while it's open. The hours are less, volume of hours through the week is less than Stodders Hill and Tully, and it's currently open Monday, Wednesday, Friday through the week, and Saturday and Sunday on weekends. The proposal is to change it to a 7-day roster now, so it's open 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. through the week and 9 a.m. to 1 p.m, so a slight change of hours on weekends as well. The customer volumes certainly supported this. While we would be open 7 days, it certainly wouldn't mean that we would be getting significantly more waste. The waste coming into that facility is likely aligned with it just be spread more across the week. But with the increase of customers using that facility recently, it would support those additional days to be open. The increase in that is expected to cost $62,000 in labour to run per year. At Cardwell and Bells Creek transfer stations, these are open quite regularly as well through the week. Cardwell's open Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays. Bells Creek Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they're both open on Saturdays and Sundays. The number of customers coming through those facilities is very low, and officers have looked at opportunities for where we can find some alternative ways to provide a service there that could be more cost effective. So the recommendation from officers is that we look to move to a self-service model. This will require some capital investment around $40,000 to $60,000 across those two facilities each. But what I'll do is allow customers to access those facilities throughout the week when they want to. We would have some restrictions on hours, daylight hours generally, but it would actually give more flexibility for customers at those two sites. We see that as a cost-effective solution to operate. We'll be able to monitor those sites remotely via CCTV, but certainly be able to continue to provide a waste service there that is significantly more cost-effective than what it is at the moment. At Murray Upper and Hull Heads transfer stations, these two sites are open currently for 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday each. The volume of customers there is extremely low. Hull Heads has around 2.6 customers per hour while it's open on weekends, and 1.5 per hour at Murray Upper transfer station. The cost of the waste that's coming through supports those numbers as well, but the cost of operating and managing the waste there is significantly higher than the rest of the region, and so officers are recommending that they close going forward from 1 August. The couple of other parts to the decision or recommendation from officers is the proximity to other transfer stations. and also the opportunity costs and savings in depreciation, insurance, ongoing maintenance, and also the logistical costs of managing 5 sites as opposed to 7 transfer stations as well. So, officers, in the all changes, forgot to mention this, all these changes are recommended to take effect from 1 August. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Any comments? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, geez, I seem to have a lot to say today. While I agree with the generalising and the rationalising of the dumps around the place, I still think I'd like to move the recommendation that I'd like to move that we actually reject the recommendation on the grounds that I think we've got a community obligation in respect of the operational hours of the dumps, and I think that I'd like to move that Tully Heads and Murray Upper sites remain open for 4 hours of a weekend for a trial period of about 12 months.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Farinelli.
I'm actually going to speak out in support of the recommendation. I've personally, through the chair, experienced the closing of a dump. I've lived in Marillion all my life, and there was a dump down Harbour Road all of my young life. It was quite contentious when the dump was closed, but we all lived with it, and life went on, and we now go to Stodders Hill, which is quite a considerable drive. I don't know off the top of my head, but possibly 25 to 30 kilometres to Stoddard from where I live. I think what we're seeing here is, naturally, we're an amalgamated council of Johnston Shire and the Cardwell Shire, and back many years ago, the Johnston Shire did rationalise their dumps. For what reason, I'm not sure, but I can remember there was a dump at Garradunga, Martyville, Cowley, Harbour Road in Marillion. They were all removed, and we all now go to Stodders Hill. I support this purely, also, as I said, I've lived through it and we survived. I think many of the people that probably use these two stations that are being proposed for close would probably shop at Tully or Cardwell, so therefore would have quite easy access to the transfer stations or dumps in those areas. But ultimately, one of my main reasons for supporting this recommendation is the commitment I've got to asset rationalisation. And we are making some tough decisions in that space as a whole of council. And ultimately, this is another process where we're trying to find savings for the region with as little pain as possible to the people of the region. And I just see this as an opportunity. We've got an educator, a waste educator now being employed by council that can assist in, this is not about just taking away and dropping these people. There's a considerable amount of time between now and the 1st of August to work with those people and just sort of educate them on other options that they have. I fully support this, and in the name of asset rationalisation, and because I've also spoken to staff and said that going through this process of rationalising our waste, I want to see savings for the ratepayers. I want to see something at the end of the day on the rates notice that shows the region we've been successful in this process. I believe this recommendation will help us deliver that. But if we deviate from this recommendation, I have concerns that we won't. That's just what I have to say.
We have a motion moved by Councillor Millwood. Do we have a seconder for her motion before we have any further? Councillor Pervin, you second it? Yeah. Okay, over to you, Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to talk against the recommendation we have in our agenda here. In our current corporate plan, it's noted that Goal 2 is to work in partnership with community to ensure that facilities and amenities meet the needs of local people and that council delivers a consistent and high level of service. We will measure ourselves to ensure our performance keeps pace with involving community expectations. So that's in our corporate plan. So I think that council's decisions should be fair to those people that use our facilities and those who pay for them. Smaller tips need a study done on them, not hours reduced. These smaller tips only allow for 1 trip per day to households, which is common knowledge, and there is currently a petition being prepared to be presented to council. These smaller tips are legally registered and really come to the front in natural disasters. I have a list of at least 25 householders that will be requiring roadside pickup, as they don't currently have council bins if things change. Now, before Christmas, I was involved in a community cleanup and was surprised with the volume of rubbish, and we don't want this to increase. When it comes to the bigger tips, a suggestion of closing them for half a day during the week in their quietest time allows for maintenance. For example, plumbers turning the water off, electricians turning the power off, roadworks with no public on site, etc. This is currently being done in many places. We live in the wettest part in Australia. Green waste should be able to be dumped at least 5 days, if not 7 days a week. Putting green waste in our red bins is costing us many dollars, as it has to be carted to Mareeba, over $400 a tonne, including all fees. Green mulch can be used around our gardens, and I believe there are farmers prepared to purchase all the mulch that we can supply, and this will at least cover mulching costs. In summary, this is a bigger picture than just opening hours of refuge tips. We can save a lot of money on wet waste and illegal dumping and make our decisions on our own figures running these refuge tips with our expenditure and income. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, I'd just like to clarify something there, that our community can go and dump green waste at our dumps at least 5 days a week at the present time. So there's no need for them to put it in their bin. The facility is available for them to do that for free.
Councillor Millwood, could I get you to read your motion now, please, so everybody understands it before we put it to a vote?
Yeah, so I would like to recommend, I'd like to move the motion that Tully Heads and Murray Upper sites are operated for a 4-hour period once a week on a trial basis for 12 months.
But you never included rejecting the
I want to reject
the officer's recommendation.
Officer's recommendation on the grounds that we have a community obligation, and then I would like to move that we keep Tully Heads and Murray Upper open for a 4-hour period for a trial of 12 months.
Mr. CEO.
Can we reject this and then have a new recommendation, please?
Well,
the way that reads, it doesn't read correctly.
Well, we're going over to the CEO for correct.
Yeah, just for
correction.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, for the sake of clarification, my understanding of your motion, which has now been seconded, Councillor Millwood, is that the body of the recommendation actually forms your motion, except insofar as the item number 6, cease operations at Hull and Murray Upper, is removed, and but rather that those facilities are kept open for, did you say, at least 4 hours a week? Yeah, so it through you, Mr. Chairman, that can stand. The rejection is based on the reason of providing a community service, and then the new resolution all forms part of that motion of Councillor Millwood's.
Just a clarification, you mentioned a review in 12 months when you first spoke. Is that part of the motion?
Yeah.
So can you read it out in full, because it's a little bit...
So firstly, I would like to reject the recommendation that we've been given by council, and on the grounds that I would like to move a new motion that the Tully Heads and Murray Upper sites are operated for a 4-hour period once a week for a trial period of 12 months.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, one more clarification. Just review the the Hull Heads and Murray Upper, or review all of the hours of operation after 12 months?
In my opinion, I was just wanting to review Tully Heads and Murray Upper sites.
Okay, so is that the understanding of the seconder?
No, I was under the understanding there was review the operational hours of all facilities in the next 12 months.
That's fair.
Are you happy with?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Mr.
Still
Chairman.
happy to second it?
Still happy to second that, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Are you comfortable with the way it's worded?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Okay, everybody understand the motion? Councillor Baines?
Just to reiterate, this motion's off the table, but the body of the motion, aside from item 6, is in the new motion. That's right? Yes. So all the rest of the stuff, all good? Yeah. And then item 6, and we do a review of all operating hours in the 2 year. That's all right, thank you.
Sorry, guys.
No,
All right. Everybody have a clear understanding of what we're voting on? Okay, any further comments? I'll put it to vote. All in favour? That's 5, and Councillor Farinelli and Councillor Barnes voting against. Okay, thank you, that's carried. Thank you, Mr Bradford. Okay, we'll move on to item 5.2, the budget review, and Ms Bradley will present this report. Welcome.
Good morning. This morning we have our budget review, which has been carried out for the period up until the 31st of January 2021. The purpose of this review is to promote sound financial management and accountability by having each manager and director review in detail the components of their areas of responsibility. So the operational budget for 2021 required the proposed amendments to incorporate some additional revenue that's been offset by associated expenditure, budget risks that were able to be mitigated, and monthly phasing adjustments. Council's capacity to deliver on our current capital budget has also been reviewed at this point in time, resulting in the recognition of additional revenue and associated expenditure due to grant funding, and has also identified proposed deferral of a number of capital projects from this budget to the following financial year. So first up, the capital budget review. So as at the 31st of January, Council has spent 38% of our capital budget excluding commitments and 53% including commitments, which is detailed in Table A. The RB2 budget review analyses the current capital spend and budget, which has resulted in the proposed reallocation of funds within programs, as well as the deferral of some projects due to Council's capacity to deliver. With 5 months remaining, or 4.5 effectively, of this financial year and an upcoming wet season, officers have scrutinised the capacity to deliver the current capital budget and have taken a very realistic stance in what we're putting forward today. Council has faced some challenges in achieving the level of capital expenditure it proposed in the first quarter budget review due to resourcing constraints. In addition, instead of realising carryover projects at the end of this financial year, Council officers have proactively assessed the current situation and have proposed deferral of those projects that it believes it will not be able to complete or commence within this financial year. This will enable Council to focus on completing projects with critical funding deadlines and those that have already commenced within this financial year, which in turn will minimise the amount of carryover into next financial year. A summary of some of those changes proposed in the capital budget include in delivery services, the deferral of $1.3 million of projects including Warramie Outstation Road, South Mission Beach Shared Path, Bingle Bay Road Culvert, McGowan Drive Footpath and various floodgate renewals. Infrastructure services have highlighted the deferral of $2.8 million of projects including Geraldton Bridge, fleet renewals, swimming pool renewals and other facility renewals, including aerodromes and halls, as well as a reduction in the estimated capital requirements for the waste transfer station operations. In the Chief Executive Department, a partial deferral of $170,000 is proposed for the Technology One CI Anywhere HRP project. In water, we're proposing a deferral of $1.2 million, including water main renewals in Nileta and Tully, smart meter rollout in Tully, network meters in Innisfail and Nileta, and other programs not currently required at this point in time. And in the waste space, we're proposing the deferral of $50,000 for the Gundi closed landfill boundary adjustment for this year. So Appendix B in this report provides a detailed listing of all of those proposed changes. In our operating budget, so the review has been undertaken at the end of January, with the table in this report highlighting Council's current financial position as at the 31st of January, and a full year forecast incorporating known future budget risks. The reviews identified some minor adjustments of revenue and expenditure items required between departments and programs, which is expected to have a nil effect on the original budget. 14 budget risks have been mitigated as part of this budget review, including but not limited to costs associated with the waste transfer station operations, a portion of interest on investment revenue anticipated shortfall, and Victory Creek Bridge arbitration costs. These budget risks have been mitigated with savings identified in our telecommunication charges, bank charges, increased revenue generated from cemetery charges and meeting room hire, as well as a reduction in electricity charges due to solar initiatives. In Table B, as I mentioned, is a summary of the financial results. Some of the key points to note are our fees and charges currently tracking over budget due to increased rate searches, increased building inspections and increased animal registrations. Year-to-date interest is currently tracking under budget due to lower than anticipated interest rates. The full year movement relates to the partial budget risk that has been mitigated in this budget review. Number 3 is our operating grants. So on a year-to-date basis, we are currently over budget due to Works for Queensland funding received in relation to projects completed in the prior financial year and receipt of the second payment of the Coastal Adaptation Strategic Plan. The full year budget has increased due to grants received for promoting and hosting Australia Day events across the region, traditional owner engagement in relation to Cardwell mountain bike study, and a correction in the TR4 feral pig management program calculation. Year-to-date employee expenditure is currently under budget due to vacant positions, which is forecasted to continue for the remaining of the financial year. Year-to-date materials and services are also under budget, relating to the timing of invoices for waste services, electricity, telecommunications and reduced fuel costs, partially offset by an increase in contractor costs for external works. And lastly, depreciation on a year-to-date basis is currently tracking over budget due to water and sewage revaluations, which is expected to continue to be a budget risk for the remainder of the financial year and has been factored into those forecasted figures in that table. Over the last quarter, it's been noted that some of the changes are required at a budget line item level within various programs of Council. And at this stage, no increase or decrease to the overall budgeted position is put forward in this report. All of these changes are detailed in Appendix C and D, and budget risks moving forward. So management identify and monitor budget risks that have the potential to impact Council, current and future budget performance. And as mentioned, we've also been able to mitigate around $620,000 worth of budget risks in this budget review. However, there still are some areas that we do need to monitor moving forward leading up until the end of financial year, including Port Hinchinbrook sewage maintenance and operational expenditure currently sitting around $130,000, depreciation of around $1 million, and interest on investments around $282 expected at this point in time. All of which have been factored into those forecast figures in the table, offset by the currently reduced employee expenses. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any comments? Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr Chair. So, Ms Bradley, just an important point I think we need to clarify. When we're saying deferral of projects, we're not saying these projects are off the table and gone. It's just let's prioritise what we need to get done this financial year, especially with the time constraints.
Through the Chair, yes, that is correct. Those projects will move into next financial year's budget preparation.
Thank you, Ms Bradley.
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And with your permission, the greatest influencing factor in respect of our CapEx, our capital expenditure, was the COVID impact, which reduced our capacity to deliver upon capital works, and we, of course, placed our focus on operational works so that we could maintain our staff cohort and not go into a debt situation. Inevitably, this has led to a point which we try to avoid generally, where the capacity to deliver upon those capital works projects is so diminished that they will have to be done at a later time. So it's a timing issue, not an intention issue, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any further comments, councillors? If not, somebody move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Over to item 5.3, the Financial Action Plan. Ms Bradley will present this report.
Thank you. So an annual benchmarking exercise has been undertaken between similar local governments, which was a recommendation for an indicator of building strong governance tools with a review that was undertaken by QTC previously. So QTC presented to Council back in 2015, but still relevant now, a new broader approach focusing on main areas of strategic, economic and regional issues, governance planning practices, financial management practices and infrastructure management practices. As part of the Building Strong Government Tools activity, benchmarking was identified as a tool in which financial comparison between similar local governments can provide meaningful information to Council, which is what we have presented here today. The benchmarking exercise compared our 2019-2020 financial data from Cassowary Coast with Livingston Shire Council, Hinchinbrook Shire Council, Whitsundays Regional Council and Tablelands Regional Council. The major financial statements variances that were highlighted as part of this review include that Cassowary Coast and Hinchinbrook both have no loans, and this is reflected in the net financial liabilities ratio in the tables that are attached. Disaster recovery capital expenditure at Whitsundays Regional Council and Hinchinbrook is reflected in the asset sustainability ratios compared to other councils. Cassowary Coast continues to have the highest value of asset base per rateable property across those benchmark councils and has seen an increase on the prior year to 76.2 thousand per rateable property. Inventories as a percentage of current assets is 2% compared to the benchmarked average of 1%. A reduced inventory holding can lead to improved cash flow as well as reduced risk due to obsolescence in stock. Council's inventory turnover ratio has improved from 1.2 times turned over each year in the 17-18 financial year to 1.56 times during the 19-20 financial year. Whilst this ratio is still on the lower side, it is an improvement on prior years and will continue to be a focus for Council staff to increase. Council generated $5.14 of operating revenue and $5.36 of operating expenditure per rateable property, compared to the average of $5.44 operating revenue and $5.74 operating expenditure per rateable property. Council has the highest percentage of outstanding rates, which as a percentage of rates revenue was 13% for 19-20 financial year, compared to the benchmarked average of 9%. However, excluding the passage holdings, Council's percentage of outstanding rates is 8% and within that benchmarked average. These ratios are detailed further in Appendix B with the definitions of what each of them refer to as well. And these results indicate that Council has achieved slightly above average on all operating performance metrics for 19-20. Council has also achieved above average on fiscal flexibility indicators except for the net operating cash flow as a percentage of net capital expenditure. This ratio has reduced from 127% in 18-19 to 31% in 19-20. The benchmarked average is 126%. However, this is due to the classification of the investments in the cash flow statement and the increased capital expenditure compared to 18-19. Explain those variances. With the net financial liabilities ratio being above average, it indicates that Council has sufficient assets to cover its revenue and current liabilities. Asset sustainability indicators are above average in 19-20. and the asset sustainability ratio is 131% for the 1920 year compared to 84% in 1819 and a benchmarked average of 99%. Natural disaster recovery capital expenditure can significantly impact that ratio when we have a natural disaster event, and the value of asset base per rateable property in our region is 33% higher than the average due to the assets that council has to maintain. Liquidity metrics have reduced in comparison to 1920, mainly due to reduced cash balances, and the liquidity metrics average for the benchmarked councils have reduced from 1920 in comparison to 1819. Cash expenses cover has reduced from 12 months in 1819 to 8 months in 1920, but is in line with the benchmarked average for that financial year. The working capital ratio has reduced from 4 times to 2.5 times and is below the benchmarked average of 2.82 times. And employee benefits are also below average, indicating that council's employee benefits, including on-costs, represent a smaller portion of the total recurrent expenditure than the average of other councils. However, this is below average predominantly due to higher depreciation costs, including in our recurrent expenditure. Council wages and salaries are below average in comparison to other councils. Without having detailed information on vacant positions, it's assumed this is a result of the increased contract labour due to vacant positions. However, we have seen an increase from prior year figures. Overall, it's considered councils in a favourable position compared to these other councils that we have benchmarked against, with no significant issues to be considered in the 1920 results. Council must continue to improve our operating performance and the volume of our asset base as well as cash flows to ensure we are sustainable in the long term.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any comments, councillors? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We move on to item 5.4, Stop Youth Crime Petition, and the CEO will present this report.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. The member for Hill, Mr Knuth, has asked Council for various levels of support in respect of a petition which is circulating currently. I'll go to the nature of that support in a moment, if I may, but for the sake of clarity, the petition which is being distributed provides that the House, that is to say the Legislative Assembly of Queensland, trial a third option for the courts in the form of relocation sentencing as a deterrent and to facilitate the rehabilitation of youth offenders. Include a presumption against bail for youths charged with the unlawful use of motor vehicles, in addition to the government-announced breaking and entering, serious sexual assault and armed robbery charges, to amend legislation so as to reintroduce breach of bail as an offence, that is to say a criminal offence, for repeat, that's my words, the last bit, I'll stick to the script, as an offence for repeat youth offenders, ensure that courts are adequately resourced so that youth offenders are dealt with in an expeditious manner, so that delay in judicial processes are not used as a reason for youth offenders to be granted bail, to repeal Schedule 1 of the Youth Justice Act of 2015, Charter of Youth Justice, Item 18, which provides that a child should be detained in custody for an offence, whether on arrest, remand or sentence, only as a last resort, and for the least time that's justified in the circumstances. 3, Mr Chairman, the Queensland Government has already announced changes on the 9th of February. The changes announced by Premier Palaszczuk include that the state government will move immediately to further crack down on juvenile crime. The new measures will target hardcore youth criminals who repeatedly offend and put the community at risk. Courts will get more powers, allowing them to require the fitting of electronic monitoring devices, that is to say GPS trackers, as a condition of bail for recidivist high-risk offenders aged 16 and 17, to create a presumption against bail for youth offenders arrested for committing further serious indictable offences such as breaking and entering, serious sexual assault and armed robbery whilst on bail. Seek assurances from parents and guardians that bail conditions will be complied with before an offender is released. Strengthen existing bail laws to provide further guidance to the courts. The Youth Justice Act to be amended to include a reference to the community being protected from recidivist youth offenders in the Charter of Youth Justice Principles, and the government will also enshrine in legislation the existing common law principle that offending whilst on bail is an aggravating circumstance when the court is imposing a sentence. To prevent crime, police will be given metal detecting wands to target knife crime on the Gold Coast. Anti-hooning laws will be strengthened to hold the registered owner of the vehicle responsible except where a vehicle is stolen or the owner can identify another driver, and a parliamentary inquiry will examine the implementation of remote engine immobilisers. So through you, Mr. Chairman, the Council Officer's recommendation is simply that Council formally decide its position in respect to the petition being circulated. If Council were to choose to agree or acquiesce with the request from Mr. Hill, then that would involve Council supporting the petition publicly through the media, that is to say via media release, have hard copies available at Council offices and facilities to allow people to sign the same, and to provide to promote the link to the petition and availability to sign hard copies via our social media, via Council social media pages. So,
thank you, Mr. CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
The CEO has given a comprehensive summary of what the government is doing currently, and further to that, in yesterday's paper, laws may see cops called by parents. Parents and carers could be required to phone the police on their own children if they re-offend while out on bail under Palaszczuk government's youth crackdown. The new laws to be introduced in Parliament yesterday seek to involve caregivers in helping police crush a crime wave being waged by about 400 hardcore young offenders across the state. These measures were drawn up in response to the horrific deaths of Kate Ledbetter, Marty Field and their unborn child Miles, and aspiring police officer Jennifer Board. Judges will now have the power to call carers and parents before the court to explain the activities of their children. To the best of my knowledge and understanding, the Queensland Premier is introducing tough new measures to tackle crime, youth crime. Anastasia Palaszczuk has commented that 48% of youth crime in Queensland is committed by about 10% of criminals, as she announced 7 changes being made. The major change relates to how bail is approved, with the presumption of a release being granted now revoked for those who commit serious indictable offences like break and enter and armed robbery. Ms Palaszczuk has announced publicly the fundamental principle of youth justice must be to protect the community from repeat offenders, and we will write that into law. Clearly, the government is acting on this, and therefore I move that the matter of the legislation dealing with youth and juvenile crime is not within Council's jurisdiction, and Council therefore should receive the correspondence and not resolve to provide a positive or negative resolution on it. So moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Baines. Yes.
Is there, should the public want to get on board and sign the petition, do they just go through Mr. Knuth's office? I mean, how does that?
Yeah,
It's got to be something that community themselves want to become involved in. So, yeah, that was my question. Thank you, through the chair.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think I can answer that. Yes, there are hard copy petitions available at various locations, and as I understand it, there's a website or a link where the petition can be accessed electronically as well. regrettably, I don't have before me that link, but I imagine it could easily be accessed.
Councillor
Mr Mayor, is there any
Barnes.
implications on individual councillors signing that petition, Mr CEO?
Through you, Mr Chairman, to use what's become somewhat common parlance, councillors absent of their councillor hat on are perfectly free to sign or not sign a petition, according to their conscience.
Further to that question, the Tableland Council have adopted the petition, but the Mareeba Shire have chosen not to be part of it. So people have made a stance on this already in local government. We have a mover and a seconder. Any further comments? I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? 4 in favour and 3 against. Okay, Councillor Purvin, Councillor Farinelli and Councillor Millwood have voted against. Okay, we move on to item 5.5, future local government meeting dates, and Mr Gott will present this report.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr Chairman. Won't go through the whole of the report. It's necessary for council to resolve to conduct local government meetings at particular times and to advertise the times and locations for those meetings. So it's proposed, or it's recommended rather, that council conduct its local government meetings on the second and fourth Thursday of each month from April 2021 through to November of 2021. That is the same practice we have at the moment, and that we hold only one local government meeting in December 2021 here in Tully, and that date will be the 9th of December. There's a schedule showing the exact dates of the second and fourth Thursday of each month on the way through.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is probably directed at the CEO. Do we have an appetite to be involving the public in our public meetings?
Through you, Mr Chairman. Thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor. At the moment, I'm operating under an instruction from the Mayor in accordance with the legislation which provides that our meetings are closed until the end of March, the end of next month. So what I've done is ask the Pandemic Committee to calculate exactly how many members of the public could enter into council's meeting rooms, and I'll have that information available. It will be for, under the legislation, it will be for the Mayor to decide whether he wants to use his power to extend through to the end of June. The legislation at the moment only provides for that possibility through to the end of June, but the Mayor will decide whether or not to instruct me. No doubt, I shouldn't speak on behalf of the Mayor, but I have no doubt that he'll consult with the councillors in this respect. I should have that information from the Pandemic Committee within days.
Thank you, Mr Gott. I just want to clarify, I don't give the CEO a direction in isolation. I consult with Mr Sadler, who chairs the internal Pandemic Committee. It's not just about public safety health issue, it's also about our staff. And he will measure up the chamber and give advice about, if we make a decision at the end of March to open up to the public, how many can actually come in. And if it is a limited number, we might even have to look at a roster system. So if somebody attends one meeting, another member of the public gets a shot the next time around. So that work is being done internally by our Pandemic Committee. They will advise the CEO and myself, and then it'll come back to the 7 councillors for a decision. Councillor Farinelli.
Mr Mayor, I just want to say that I personally don't agree with us continuing to keep meetings closed. I've spoken to a councillor at Hinchinbrook who's advised me their meetings have been open for quite a considerable amount of time, and they're just monitoring the amount of people that come into the room. Something that was suggested to me was also people being able to register to attend a council meeting, so that's done in advance of the meeting. I don't support this recommendation because for the simple reason that I would like to see us getting back to this here basically tells me that we're potentially looking at closing meetings, or if not, still limiting attendance to only those in the Tully area by having the meetings to December in Tully Chambers, whereas once upon a time they were shared between Innisfail and Tully. So I think, you know, we have had instances in these very chambers where we've had up to 8 people, members of the public, attend presentations we haven't had any issue, so I'm not sure why we're continuing to close meetings to the public. That's just my personal opinion, but obviously it's been decided to the end of March. I just think that moving forward, I'd like councillors to consider opening meetings to the public after that date. But if that is the case, I believe I'd like to see us go back to meetings, local government meetings being shared between Tully and Innisfail, and same for councillor information sessions, but that's just my point of view.
I'll go to the CEO first.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. This is simply to set the dates and locations. Councillor Farinelli doesn't go to the issue of whether the public's involved or not. That would be something that would be dealt with at a later time. If the my suggestion would be that perhaps the decision as to locations really is relevant to the issue that you're describing in terms of whether the meetings are open to the public or not. So perhaps if we just get the times and locations in place now and then review it next month in respect of the Mayor's instruction to me or otherwise. Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to speak to is the reason why we're having the meetings in Tully is the technology for live streaming. It's very expensive to set it up, and if we're going to rotate between Tully and Innisfail, there's going to be a significant cost. And that information was given to me by the IT department. I didn't make that up. So be aware that if you want the option of going back to Innisfail and to Tully on a rotation basis, it's going to come at a significant cost. I personally have got no problem at all having the meetings down here and workshops and CISs in Innisfail. I think it's working really well. Live streaming has been really well received, and having the technology in this room is ready to go. And I just don't see the sense of rotating the formal meetings. Councillor Baines was first.
Well, Mr. Mayor, sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to go back to that the resolution as it stands isn't talking about whether we allow the public in or no. It's just about setting the dates and the location. I think that can be reviewed. We've got to be very cautious. The COVID's not over and done with yet. You know, we all believe that we're very, very safe, but, you know, out of the last lockdown in Melbourne, someone had flown out of the airport before the lockdown occurred, come to the Cassowary Coast region, been in a very large facility with a lot of people. Nothing happened, but it's as simple as something like that to go on. So, I mean, again, I just want to go back to the resolution today is just setting the dates and location at this stage, and we're not discussing allowing the meetings to be open to the public. What other councils do with their risk management is up to them, but I'm still very cautious in this space.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Farinelli.
Through the chair, just want to clarify, I don't have a problem with the dates. I have a problem with the fact that we're locking in the location till the end of this year. That's all I have an issue with. The dates I don't have a problem with, naturally. They're just consistent with what we've always done. The issue I have is with looking in the location.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Farinelli. Mr. CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, may I have your permission to direct a question to a staff member who's not on camera? This may help to inform Council's decision. Daniel, do you know how many days it takes to do the transfer of all of that hardware from here to Innisfail, and how many people are involved?
I'm not sure. We definitely need to get Ben, the heavy to do the setup, because we don't have the skill set in-house to manage it.
Does any council officer at the back of the room have a clue, have an idea as to how many days it takes and how many people are involved?
Mr. Goodman is going to come and give us a bit of a briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A bit of a briefing is a very good characterisation, but I would just point out to councillors that if councillor does have a view to opening these meetings to the public, this room is significantly larger than the boardroom in Innisfail, and so that if you do make that decision going forward to open it to the public, this room also will allow more people, because of square metre rules and those sorts of things, will allow more of the public to attend than the boardroom in Innisfail. So that should also come into your consideration when you're making these decisions. Not just the cost of shifting the AV equipment backwards and forwards.
Thanks, Mr. Goodman. Could I get a clarification from Mr. Sadler? The equipment we rent it, we don't own it. The live streaming equipment. Mr. Singh's going to answer the question by Lewitt. Cash register.
Good example of a team effort, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, councillors. Good morning, all. I guess in terms of the actual setup, we don't own it. It's quite expensive to buy the camera and other equipment that goes with it. So potentially, what we would be looking at is getting Ben in, and with the help of a council staff, at least, you'd be looking at removing all the infrastructure from here, and then taking it up to the next venue, and then literally replicating the setup. So that would be at least minimum 2 days of effort every time you shuffle between meetings, and I think part of this will be probably we probably end up getting Ben in every time to test as well, to just make sure when we move, we have to again make sure that the equipment are working as well. So that probably would become an ongoing thing, whereas at the moment with the setup we have, it doesn't move, so it stays here. It's all been tested for, and we literally don't have to get Ben in, and I think the staff at the moment are running it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Councillor Farinelli.
So ultimately, the other option we would have would be to basically have a quarter, do it on a quarterly basis, and have it here for a quarter, and then shift it to Innisfail for a quarter. That way, then it may only mean 1 or 2 instances where we're needing to shift the equipment. I'm just thinking of what the community may want the opportunity. I'm just looking for a solution. It's just a suggestion. As it doesn't have to be fortnight. I totally understand the cost involved in that. So, is there another solution where we basically have a quarter here, a quarter in Innisfail, and we're just trying to be fair.
Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, further to, like we've said, we're actually only making a decision today on the actual dates, but in defence of Councillor Farinelli, I think that moving them to and fro is not a good idea. If the general public do want to get involved when the time comes, we can have some sort of system where you register. It's going to be the same. You have to register in Innisfail, you've got to register in Mission Beach, or you've got to register in Tully, wherever we decide to have the meetings, but a register place is going to be the only way you're going to get over the top of this. I think moving the places is no good. But back onto it, I think today is just all about the dates.
Okay. See ya.
Mr. Chairman, that does specify the locations too. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't have the thing on. It does specify the locations too.
Any further comments, councillors? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Six in favour and Councillor Farinelli's against. That's carried, thank you. We'll move on to 6.5, Future Waste Resource Convention. And I think Councillor Millwood has a conflict on this one. Yes, thanks. And the CEO will present this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you're aware, Future Waste Resources Convention is being held from the 1st to the 3rd of next month. FWR, that is to say Future Waste Resources, is the setting for all stakeholders, organisations, government, businesses to come together to examine challenges and opportunities in respect of both national and international impacts of the pandemic and social wellbeing and so on. As you're aware, consistent with Councillor Millwood's portfolio, she's decided to attend the Future Waste Resources Convention, and I'm recommending that the costs of her attendance. I've just done it again. Through you, Mr. Chairman. The Future Waste Resources Convention is being held from the 1st to the 3rd of March 2021, consistent with Councillor Millwood's portfolio. She will be attending that convention. My recommendation is that the costs, insofar as they relate to Councillor Millwood, be covered by Council to be sourced from its conventions and conferences vote. In this particular case, the cost is $2,648.
Thank you, Mr. Gott. Any comments, councillors? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 5.7, CCR Audit Committee, and Ms Slattery will present this report. Welcome.
Morning, Ms Slattery.
This report is recommending the appointment of a new independent member of the Audit Committee. That's me. Try again. This report is recommending the appointment of a new independent member of the Audit Committee. By way of background, the Council's Audit Committee currently consists of 4 members. So we have the Mayor, a Councillor, Councillor Farinelli, and 2 independent external members. The Audit Committee charter states that the membership is to be at least 3 and no more than 6 members. Last year, the Council endorsed the inclusion of an additional independent external member to ensure succession planning and to assist the committee in its roles and obligations under the committee charter. In January this year, Council called for expressions of interest to fill this additional membership role. We had a total of 23 expressions of interest were received. 15 were from Queensland and 8 were outside of Queensland. And of the 15 within Queensland, 10 expressions were from the local area, so that's from the Cairns and the Cassowary Coast region. Of the 23 candidates, at least 8 were considered to be of very high quality. And on the 15th of February, 4 of the candidates were interviewed by the Audit Committee Chair and Council staff. And the results of that process is a recommendation today to Council. So Campbell Charlton, commonly known as Cam, is a well-known professional within the Far North region with extensive Audit Committee and Risk Committee experience. Cam's career has focused on sustainable business growth and development with a strong emphasis on performance enhancement and governance. Contained within the report is a list of Cam's current appointments, which includes involvement in other councils. And the interview panel are very confident of Cam's contribution to this council's Audit Committee will be highly valued. As such, it is the recommendation that Council appoint Campbell Charlton, who's a Director of Kleinhart Proprietary Limited based in Cairns, as an independent member of the CCRC Audit Committee for a term of 4 years. Happy to
Thank you,
take
Ms
questions.
Slattery. Any questions? Councillor Farinelli.
Just through the chair to advise councillors, I wasn't involved in, even though I'm on the committee, I wasn't involved as far as appointing this person or going through or interviewing, but I was sent all 4 of the CVs of the top that were interviewed, and without even speaking to the staff, Cam was the one that stood out to me. So I feel very confident in moving this recommendation once.
Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Millwood. Any further comments? No. Put it to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Slattery. We move on to item 6, Asset Sustainability 6.1, the CCR Capital Report, and Mr Fisher will present this report. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Morning, councillors. Through the chair, this report provides details of the status of our capital projects, and as we discussed, was discussed by council earlier in the budget review, we are deferring a number of projects. And as was also discussed, deferral doesn't mean deletion; it means simply deferral to next financial year. I guess as detailed in the report, we're 52% through, and obviously with the recent wet weather, have obviously struggled to complete works at a rate we would like to see. The deferrals and what you'll see in terms of the status report is obviously a focus on those funded jobs which have a June 2021 deadline. Happy to take any questions through the chair.
Thank you, Mr Fisher. Any comments or questions? Go to Councillor Barnes.
Chair, yes, Mr Fisher, there's a fair few projects here deferred. Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Mr Fisher, there's a fair few projects deferred. Would you like to just touch on a few of them? Like if you go through them, you've got the Mission Beach Stinger Net, Mundu aerodrome fencing renewal. Is it because of the weather, or is it because of staffing, or?
Obviously, weather is a definite factor. The ones that we've deferred are typically the ones where it's council's own funding, which doesn't have a deadline. It's far simpler for us to carry that money over. I guess within that also there are other opportunities. So example you picked or highlighted was the Mundu fencing. So we've actually applied for a grant, and so there's reasons like that with some of those projects, and likewise I guess just in terms of how far we're progressed with design and our own capacity issues as well, has also led to those selected projects being deferred.
Thank you, Mr Fisher. Any further questions? If not, somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Move on to item 6.2, community use of assets, and Mr Fisher will present.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. Councillors, this report is, I guess, the next step as we see it in terms of the principles which Council adopted on the 12th of December 2020, 15 principles which will guide future policy and framework for the way community groups access and use community-owned assets. I guess obviously this project is running in parallel with our asset rationalisation project, and really what we're seeking to do here is provide clarity, set expectations within the community about how council will undertake to work with the community for the use of assets. And obviously this policy, the future policy will touch a whole number of a number of groups, but also just really leave a fingerprint on the shape and the way we work with our community into the future. And I guess those principles that council have adopted, we see as a solid platform. But what I'm presenting to you today is a list of what I'm calling expectations and responsibilities. So we've expanded those principles into what they would actually look like in application and what they wouldn't be in application. Again, so the community can say, well, I understand your principle. Well, what's that look like, or what's that not? And ultimately, we propose that if supported, we would use these to then flesh out and guide that development of the policy and framework. So, but also that in the conversations that council and council staff are having within the community, with a whole number of user groups. Some around asset rationalisation, some around just general use of infrastructure, that we use these expectations and responsibilities to guide those discussions. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, through the chair. So yeah, Justin, I'm really happy to see this here, because I've had lots of people coming to me with irregularities within the community with different community groups. So to put them all on the same page and give them all the same information and the same set of rules, I think is a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Farinelli.
Yes, through the chair, I think this is equally as important as the process we're going through with asset rationalisation, to have some set guidelines and expectations of council, so that everyone could be treated on and dealt with on a even playing field. Understanding those expectations, and at the end of the day, it's all about how we utilise council-owned assets and making sure they're being utilised to the best of their potential.
Thank you, Councillor Farinelli. Any further comments? Move the recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Move on to item 7, planning, and 7.1, development application. And Mr. Thomas will present this report. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
Mr. Thomas.
Council is in receipt of an application for a material change of use for an indoor sport and recreation facility with ancillary coffee and smoothie bar. The application was prepared by Tweak Fitness Tully for the establishment of the facility within the township zone, Tully Central Business Precinct, situated at 5 and 7 Still Street, Tully. The applicant intends to relocate an established business from its current site at 52 Butler Street. Tweak Fitness has been operational in Tully since 2014. It is expected that the proposed subject sites will offer additional space and services to the business to accommodate clientele and hire additional local staff to meet new demands. The proposed development would offer the following core services: gym memberships, personal training, and provision of fitness programs. The operations of the development are not intended to include group fitness classes, and these services would be held at an alternative off-site location. This will ensure that any impacts from the proposed development would be limited to surrounding uses. In addition to the proposed fitness facility, a coffee and smoothie bar would be incorporated into the use to expand the services provided. The additional service will allow existing clientele in the community alike the opportunity to take advantage of health-based refreshments, while also providing additional area to conduct the business. The space allocated for the coffee and smoothie bar would be approximately 19 square metres, or 8.5% of the floor space of the entire facility. There will be an additional 15 square metres to cater for seating for these uses. The applicant has proposed that 7 Still Street Tully would be used to provide off-street car parking spaces for customers. The application was impact accessible, and therefore public notification was carried out. No properly made submissions were received by Council. The application is generally consistent with the provisions of the Cassowary Coast Regional Council Planning Scheme 2015, and therefore the application for a material change of use for indoor sport and recreation with ancillary coffee and smoothie bar is recommended for approval, subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Happy to answer any questions Council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Councillor Millwood. You're moving it? Seconded?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Oh, comment, yeah. Councillor.
Yes, I just would like to congratulate the project. I think the pictures of the finished project look great. I think it'd be a benefit to Tully. That is a lovely building. To have it resurrected like that is just got to be a great thing. So I'd like to second the motion and congratulate everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any further comments, councillors? We have a mover and a seconder. Put the motion. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.2, delegations report, and Mr. Horton will present this report. Welcome.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. Morning, Council. Hope everyone's well. Council, I turn to page. Sorry, guys. So, page 147, Council, of the report, our delegations report for the month of January is here and prepared. The main component, Council, it's been a pretty good month. The averages are the same as what they were in the previous couple of years beforehand, Mr. Mayor, Council. Overall for the calendar year, our financial year, sorry, I should say, we're up 48 applications in total in the planning area. So that is nice to see compared to the same time last year. So that's a really good improvement, Council. For our building and dwelling approvals, we had 7 for the month, Council, which is averaging. The year before we had 6 and 3 and so forth over those higher standards around that January area. As we know, we've done a lot of approvals prior to January, and we were cut short in December as well, with an early finish on the 18th. So overall, Council, we had 29 for the month in the building area, 2.627 million of dollar figure for all those approvals. In the dwelling areas, we had 2.2, so it's a considerable amount in dwellings there in costs and considerable design. A lot of the buildings that we have approved and dwellings that we have approved are substantial structures. You know, they're not small dwellings. You know, they're in the range of anything over 300, some are 400. We've done some around the 600 square mark, so they're not small dwellings of any sort. So a lot of the area is getting built up, and it's good to see, Council. Other than that, Council, is pretty much straightforward and within the graphs, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Any questions for the officer? No comments? All right. Somebody move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Horton.
Thank you.
We move on to item 8, general business. Any general business, Councillor Pervin?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. CEO, I've been approached by some residents and businesses within the Cassowary Coast region. I'd like you to take on notice and reach out to the Pandemic Committee and liaise with them and the agricultural industry about how council could help out and offer some assistance in finding suitable places to use as quarantine facilities to help with the issue of shortage of workers within the industry.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Pervin, as I understand it at the moment, the quarantine facilities are generally being distributed over any number of farms and other properties, and what you're asking me to do is to have the Pandemic Committee look at areas where centralised quarantine facilities could be provided.
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Basically. But the quarantine, you're not asking for this. Did I talk over you? I'm sorry.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. You're good.
But you're not asking for council to look at capitalising the... No. Okay, yeah.
No, just to help out with them and finding a suitable place where they can do it and use it as a hub.
Yeah, we'll do. Mr. Sadler, the chairman of the Pandemic Committee, is at the back of the room nodding his head and smiling. I think that's a smile.
That's noted.
Yeah.
I think he's going to speak to it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We can look at land parcels and locations across the region and look at assisting in relation to that. No different to we did in relation to those the Vanuatuans coming into the region.
Will do.
Thanks, Mr. Sadler. Because as it is at this point in time, I think they've been using the Darragee Environmental Education Centre, and when school resumes, they can't use those premises, so they are just looking for alternatives to that. And if council could help out in identifying some possible places, I think it'd be benefit to the industry.
Yeah. Through you, Mr Chairman, you're happy to do so. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin. Thank you, Mr Sadler. Councillor Norwood.
Through the chair, yes. I've got an old abandoned car on Jack Drive that I have reported several times. I've put in CRs. It goes round and round in circles. I would like something, I'd like council to investigate further because it's actually an environmental hazard. We just need to do something about it. So I'll leave it on the table. Thanks.
Mr CEO, you want to respond to that?
Through you, Mr Chairman, is that the one in that drain that, yeah, okay, we'll have another look at it, Councillor.
Jack Drive.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you, Mr Mayor. Recently we had a horrific situation with a crocodile incident, and I think as councillors one day we should get together and have a good conversation with our officers and just see if council as a whole could assist government bodies or whatever bodies required to try and prevent a situation like that happening again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Clearly, it's a state jurisdiction. We work under their auspices, and I'll let Mr Sadler speak to the protocol.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Councillor Barnes, for your question. Some time ago, we did go back to the state, the regional manager, in relation to the crocodile management plan for the region, and we've requested a review of that plan. We will be having further discussions in relation to that in the near future.
Thank you. One of the supporting arguments about a review is coming from the agricultural sector, who are highlighting that crocodiles are now going up their drains onto their farms. The mayor in Hinchinbrook Shire had a crocodile on his farm, and it entered that property through drains. The farmers are telling us that the abundant population of tilapia is one of the reasons. There's a huge food source for the crocs, but with the population expanding, the bigger crocs are pushing the smaller ones out of the system, and they're looking for refuge up drains and into cane paddocks, etc. So the state government need to have a review before we can do much. And I believe Councillor Baines, being our member on that committee, is certainly rattling the chain to have that occur in Cassowary Coast. Would you like to speak to it at all?
Through you, Mr Chair, there is a lot of work being done in this space. I will say, post-COVID, we haven't had a crocwise round table for quite a while, but that's part of the negotiation at the moment with the state, and looking at the possibilities of reviewing the management plan. We need to do it at that strategic level, and I think it's once we get the meeting organised and appropriate, and I'll make sure that I bring any findings, or I'll bring a report back to council as well.
Happy with that, Councillor Barnes? Yep. Thank you, Mr Sadler. Any further general business? Councillor Barnes.
Mr Mayor, I was just going to ask Mr Goodman about the latest progress on our dredging. We had a very successful meeting last week in Cardwell. We had representatives from the federal government there. We had the liquidator, who I thought was who presented himself very well, and now starting to come to table on a few issues. Just like to ask Mr Goodman.
You, Mr Goodman.
Through you, Mr Mayor, councillors, there is not a lot of new information that I can provide in terms of this dredging project, past the report that was provided to council late last year. We have made submission to the federal government as per the federal government's invitation to apply for funding. We did that in December. There has been a subsequent request for further information or clarification of information that was provided in early January, and we responded to that quite quickly. We continue to await for the outcome from the federal government as to whether we are successful with funding or not. That is something through the chair that there is a lot of misconception in the public. There is this misconception that a cheque was handed to council for $1.5 million, and that clearly, as you all know, is not the case. We were provided an invitation to apply for $1.5 million. We've done a significant amount of work to get us into this space where we have been able to make that submission. As it stands at the moment, we have not been able to attract any state or federal government funding for this project. The only funding that has been spent on this project is Cassowary Coast Regional Council's funding to get this project to the stage that we can have made submission for funding, but that is where it is. We continue to work with the tenderers so that on the expectation that we will receive funding and that we can award a contract and deliver a project if that is the case. But right now we just have no option but to sit and wait and see if we are successful in gaining that funding.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, just while we got you there, David, I'd just like to make a mention that there was actually a tragedy happen at Tully Hospital grounds a few weeks back. I'd like to offer my condolences to the family. Council were involved as part of the discussions. I'd just like the community to know that through Mr. Goodman and the building, the construction people who carried out the construction at the Tully Hospital, there is actually meetings and there will be progression to something being done about the issue.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further general business? Councillor Baines.
I have an item, Mr. Chair, so thank you. I had the pleasure of attending. Don't run away, David. I'm going to mention your tie. I had the pleasure of attending the. Yesterday was War Animals Remembrance Day, which is quite a significant occasion. And I'm just going to mention your purple tie, David, because obviously you're aware that War Animals, it's a purple poppy. So David and I both have purple ties on today. The piece I wanted to add through you, Mr. Chair, just was the President and the Secretary of the Tully sub-branch of the RSL and all the members who attended. It wasn't a huge turnout, but was very significant and quite emotional for some of the residents. They've asked me to pass their thanks over to the Cassowary Coast team for the great works that they did in supporting them and getting the facilities looking like $1 million. So I'd just like to pass on the personal thanks and congratulations on behalf of the Tully sub-branch to the crew and all their great work, and thanks for the purple tie, David.
Thanks, Councillor Baines. Any further general business? You've given me a lead in, Mr. Baines, or Councillor Baines, and it's in relation to the announcement from the Premier on Tuesday. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk on Tuesday morning revealed that dawn services and marches and public commemorations would proceed unimpeded. The media also picked up on her speech with quote of the day. Because we've worked together to stay safe, this year we can safely gather to mark the sacrifices of those who have served, lest we forget. And on that matter, could councillors indicate to Ms Sands if you're going to attend a service, so a wreath can be organised, and we'll share the duties on the day and the dawn service, of course. So if you have a mind to attend, let Ms Sands know so a wreath can be organised for you. Are there any further matters of general business? If not, I'll declare the meeting closed at 10:50. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.